Dear Chosen One, they were wrong. They looked at him, praised his name, built spiritual altars around his life, but heaven never spoke about him. The true prophecy never favors the most visible. It chooses the one who's been tested in silence. And you, Chosen One, were tested. You were rejected, overlooked, pushed out of the very story your soul was written into, while someone else stood in a spotlight that belonged to you in the spirit. But God does not forget. What was prophesied over your bloodline is now being fulfilled, and that's why the attacks intensified. They called for spiritual backup. They made secret covenants. And yes, Chosen One, they summoned demons to stop you. That's why you can't leave this video. Because what you're facing isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. They knew that if you ever woke up to who you truly are, the entire illusion would collapse. Their influence would crumble. The fake Chosen One would be exposed. And so, the sabotage began. Confusion, delays, emotional warfare. But it didn't work, did it? Even when you were down, something in you kept standing up. Even without answers, you carried a fire that wouldn't die. And now that you're finally stepping into the fullness of your calling, they're terrified. Behind the scenes, alliances are breaking, spells are backfiring, and the name they tried to bury is being lifted by divine hands. You need to hear this until the very end. Because what was hidden about you is going to be unveiled in this video. You'll understand why they thought the prophecy was about him, but it was always about you. You'll realize that the pain, the injustice, the constant spiritual pressure was because you carry a frequency that cannot be copied or replaced. And once that truth is spoken here, something will shift inside your soul. So get ready, take a deep breath, and if you already feel it, drop it in the comments right now. The prophecy is mine. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, because what's about to unfold will unlock something no demon can ever shut down. You've always felt that something about you didn't quite fit. Even in rooms full of people, there was a quiet knowing deep in your soul that you were set apart for something sacred. But while you wrestled in the shadows with your calling, someone else stood in the spotlight that was never truly theirs. They were celebrated, praised, lifted up, and everyone around you assumed the prophecy was about them. The way they spoke, the way they moved, the way people followed them, it seemed to fit. But what no one realized was that heaven had chosen someone else entirely, and that someone was you. You weren't supposed to be seen too soon. God hid you for a reason. Because what you carry cannot be contaminated by fame or false affirmation. The true anointing comes with fire, with tears, with scars, and you have them all. That's why the weight you've felt your whole life hasn't been a curse, but a confirmation. While others were being exalted publicly, you were being prepared privately. But when your light finally started to break through the cracks, the ones who had built their identity around the false prophecy began to panic. Because your presence alone began to expose what was never real to begin with. They tried to silence you in subtle ways at first. Doubt, rejection, isolation. They planted seeds in your mind, hoping you would disqualify yourself before you ever realized who you were. And when that didn't work, they escalated. Some went to spiritual leaders. Others turned to rituals, energy work, or straight-up darkness. They didn't want you to awaken. They didn't want you to speak. Because they knew if you rose up, everything they built on the lie would fall apart. And so they called for help, not from heaven, but from hell itself. That's when you started feeling things you couldn't explain. Heavy atmospheres, dreams that weren't yours, unexplainable fatigue, doors closing for no reason, people turning against you without cause. It wasn't all in your head, Chosen One. They activated real demonic forces to shut you down. Not because of how you look or what you have, but because of the frequency of your soul. You carry a divine code, a spiritual fire that threatens the counterfeit. And once that frequency began to rise, they panicked. But even under attack, you didn't quit. Even when you were confused, you didn't collapse. Something inside you refused to die. That was the sign. That was the proof. The prophecy couldn't be stolen, only delayed. While they were busy building their altars to the wrong person, heaven was building a throne for you. You were being forged in fire while they were performing. And now that the curtain is falling, the world is about to see the one they overlooked was the one God had crowned from the start. Everything is shifting now. The hands that once blocked you are being removed. The voices that once silenced you are being muted. The truth is surfacing. The light is winning. And the false chosen one is losing control. What was built around image and manipulation can't stand in the presence of real anointing. And what you carry is real. That's why your very existence is a threat. That's why they tried so hard to destroy you. But they were too late, because heaven already declared the outcome. This entire time, you weren't fighting just for your future. You were fighting for your identity. And now that your eyes are opening, the old illusions are crumbling. You see it clearly now. They tried to bury you, because they knew the moment you stood in your truth, the prophecy would start to unfold. Chosen one, the suffering wasn't a punishment. It was a process of unveiling. And now, the unveiling has begun. They thought you were too fragile to handle what was coming. They assumed that the rejection would make you retreat, that the silence would silence you, that the loneliness would rot you from the inside out. But the truth is, everything they used to destroy you only made you stronger. Every abandonment sharpened your discernment. Every lie taught you to listen more carefully to your spirit. Every door that slammed in your face taught you that man's approval was never your foundation. And while they were gathering their armies of words, spells, gossip, and manipulation, you were being trained by angels in the secret place. They didn't know it, but heaven was using their warfare to activate your gifts. And now that they've done their worst, there's nothing left to fear. When they couldn't defeat you emotionally, they tried to corrupt your identity spiritually. They whispered through familiar voices, planted self-doubt in sacred moments, used people you trusted to project false reflections onto your soul. The goal was simple. If you questioned yourself long enough, maybe you'd never claim what's already yours. But your soul wouldn't let go. There was a seed inside you that refused to be poisoned. That seed was truth. And truth, when watered by suffering, produces divine clarity. They tried to convince you that you were too broken, too unworthy, too late. But deep down, you always knew, there's something different about me. I was born for something more. Chosen one. Here's what they never expected. Your awakening. They never prepared for what would happen when the real prophecy began to manifest in your life. They thought they had more time. They believed their spiritual interference had sealed your fate. But you started praying differently. You started seeing differently. You began to strip away the conditioning and illusions placed on you since childhood. And that's when it started. The spiritual shift. You stopped looking for validation. You stopped chasing peace in places that could never give it to you. And in that stillness, you heard the voice of God for yourself. That moment was the beginning of your reemergence. The attacks didn't stop, but they started losing power. What used to break you barely scratched the surface anymore. What once sent you spiraling into confusion now brings you into discernment. You became spiritually sober, grounded, clear. The emotional chaos they once used to manipulate you lost its grip. You were no longer operating from wounds, but from wisdom. And when they realized that nothing they did could pull you back into the fog, that's when they began to fear you. Not because you retaliated, not because you cursed them back, but because you healed. And healing is the loudest revolution the spirit world can hear. At this point, you began to notice the reversal. People who once controlled the narrative started losing their influence. The ones who were exalted in your place began to stumble. Their words grew hollow. Their energy shifted. The illusion they built couldn't hold under the weight of your truth, and you weren't even trying to expose anyone. You were just rising, and that was enough to send the whole counterfeit structure into collapse. Because true light doesn't argue with darkness. It reveals it by simply existing. That's what you are now, a living revelation, a walking confirmation, the prophecy in motion. Some of them started panicking in silence. They realized what they had done. They remembered the moments they felt the real anointing in you and ignored it. The times they saw glimpses of your fire and chose someone safer. And now, as they watch your emergence, they can't undo what's been set in motion. Some will try to come back. Others will attempt to discredit your rise. But none of them can stop what God has decreed. You are no longer bound to their perception of you. You are now aligned with heaven's perception, and that's unshakable. The prophecy has a pulse, and it's beating through your life louder than ever. And now, the spiritual realm is adjusting to your return. Demons that were once sent to monitor you are now fleeing. The principalities that circled your bloodline for generations are beginning to break, not because you shouted, not because you fought like them, but because you remembered who you are. This remembering is your weapon. This awareness is the fulfillment. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You are walking in what was already yours, and heaven is making sure that nothing and no one can stand in the way of what was written about you before time began. You've probably wondered, why me? Why did the weight fall on your shoulders while others seem to glide through life untouched? Why did the spiritual war center around your name, your mind, your emotions, while the so-called anointed lived comfortably in illusion? Here's the truth they never told you. Because the prophecy is alive inside of you, not in theory, not in title, but in embodiment. You are the prophecy fulfilled in skin. You didn't just receive a word. You were born as the manifestation of a divine word. And when prophecy becomes flesh, it terrifies every counterfeit structure built on empty declarations. You weren't attacked for your weakness. You were attacked because your mere existence threatened the systems that profit from spiritual lies. They studied the wrong person. They invested in the wrong vessel. They poured oil on the wrong head. And the moment heaven rejected that offering, everything started unraveling. But instead of repenting, instead of acknowledging their mistake, they doubled down. That's when the darkness grew louder. That's when the rituals began. That's when they whispered your name in spaces that reeked of incense and manipulation. But what they didn't understand was this. You were already anointed in secret. You were already chosen in silence. And you never needed their approval to fulfill what God already confirmed. Their rejection wasn't your ruin. It was your redirection. You weren't late. You were hidden. And now, your visibility is not a coincidence. It's a divine announcement. Everything in your life that felt like delay was actually divine protection. The jobs you didn't get, the relationships that fell apart, the platforms that ignored you, none of it was punishment. It was all orchestration. God was preserving your oil, keeping your name clean, making sure your rise wasn't tied to corrupted systems. Because when the real chosen one emerges, they must emerge untouchable. That's why the process was so brutal. Because your foundation had to be pure enough to carry what's coming. And now, it's here. You've stepped into the moment they prayed would never come. The unveiling, the shift, the divine exposure, and the same ones who mocked you in private are watching you rise in public. But this isn't about revenge. This isn't about ego. This is about alignment. The truth always finds its way through, and what God planted in you has matured in the dark. You didn't need to convince anyone. You just needed to keep breathing, healing, standing. And now, even the demons know they can't stop what's already been birthed in the spirit. This isn't just a comeback, it's a coronation. The energy has shifted completely. Where once there was resistance, now there's recognition. Where once there was heaviness, now there's clarity. The veil has been torn. The fog is gone. You are no longer guessing. You are no longer doubting. You are now moving with authority, because your spirit has caught up with your assignment. What they thought they could keep from you, heaven is now releasing without apology. The same rooms they tried to keep you out of are now crumbling without your presence. Because when a prophecy matures, it doesn't knock, it breaks through. And even as the world begins to see, you remain grounded. Because this elevation didn't come from flattery or ambition, it came through wilderness, warfare, and divine refinement. You're not seeking applause. You're not chasing validation. You're standing in purpose. And that, chosen one, is unstoppable. They can no longer confuse the people. They can no longer manipulate the outcome. Because your life is now the living proof of what happens when God hides someone, only to reveal them at the perfect time. What once felt like confusion now feels like confirmation. You can trace it back. Every betrayal, every silence, every collapse was pushing you into deeper alignment. They didn't know it, but their rejection helped unlock your authority. The silence they placed around your name made your voice stronger. And while they were busy trying to preserve a false prophecy, God was writing your legacy in places they couldn't access. You were growing roots in sacred soil, being watered by the Spirit, not by public praise. That's why your foundation is unshakable now. Because your calling wasn't built on exposure, it was built on endurance. And now, the world is beginning to feel the ripple effect of your obedience. Even when it didn't make sense, even when it hurt, even when you questioned if you'd ever recover, you kept walking, you kept breathing, you kept choosing truth over comfort. And that consistency has created a frequency in the spiritual realm that cannot be ignored. That's why things feel different now. That's why people look at you with silent awe or silent fear. They can't explain it, but your energy announces what their mouths refuse to say. The prophecy has been fulfilled. The spotlight never belonged to the loudest. It always belonged to the most aligned. And your alignment came through tears, not tactics. That's why no demon can take what you've built, because it wasn't built in pride. It wasn't built through performance. It was built in secret obedience, forged in isolation, and protected by divine intelligence. You're not the loudest voice in the room, but your silence carries thunder. You don't need to explain yourself anymore. Your presence explains everything, and even those who don't want to believe in you can't deny you anymore. The irony is that the very ones who tried to bury you now need your covering. The ones who conspired against you are now unraveling, and yet your heart has changed. There's no bitterness in your rise, no vengeance in your glow, just clarity, just peace, just divine authority. Because you're not rising for validation, you're rising for assignment. And that shift in posture is what separates you from the counterfeit. You're not ascending to prove them wrong. You're ascending to fulfill what was spoken over your spirit before this world even knew your name. Let's be honest. Part of you wanted them to see. Part of you wanted them to admit it, to acknowledge the error, to say, "We missed it. You were the one." And maybe they never will. Maybe their pride won't let them. But that's no longer your responsibility. Their silence won't change your assignment. Their denial won't delay your destiny. God didn't call you to be celebrated by them. He called you to walk in covenant with Him. And that covenant is still intact, still active, still unstoppable. Everything that once disoriented you now directs you. The same spiritual attacks that left you weak are now your training ground. You've gained spiritual weight, emotional maturity, discernment that cuts through illusion in seconds. And that's why they're afraid, because you're not guessing anymore. You're not seeking anymore. You've stepped into knowing. You've remembered your name. And once a chosen one remembers who they are, there's no turning back. Only forward, only higher, only deeper into purpose. This is the moment the enemy hoped you'd never reach. A state of awareness so strong that no spell, no lie, no ritual can survive in your field. You're walking in divine immunity, covered, centered, commissioned. The light they tried to curse is now shining straight into their shadows, and the vibration of your obedience is dismantling the systems they built, not because you fought them, but because you aligned with something greater than them. And now they're watching in silence as heaven lifts you with hands they can't touch. You don't need to force your way forward anymore. You've become magnetic to divine timing. Everything that once ran from you is now being drawn to you, not because you begged, but because you became. You didn't chase the calling, you allowed it to take root inside of you. That's why now, doors are opening with no explanation. People are reaching out with no prompting. The very things you used to fight for are now fighting for your attention. Because when you carry the real anointing, the universe reorganizes itself to reflect your alignment. That's what's happening now. And no amount of spiritual interference can stop the inevitable. Those who once said, "It's not him," or "She's not ready," are now forced into stillness. Heaven is making them watch, not out of cruelty, but because this is how God teaches correction through revelation. Your rise is not just for you, it's a mirror. It reflects what happens when the rejected become the righteous, when the ignored become the ignited. And your life now preaches a sermon louder than any voice could. The ones who tried to distort the prophecy are now witnessing it unfold without their permission. And that, chosen one, is justice. But this is where your spirit must stay grounded. Because with visibility comes temptation, and with validation comes new tests. The enemy doesn't stop attacking just because you're rising. He just changes his strategy. Now, he'll try to make you believe you've arrived. He'll try to pull you into performance, ego, distraction. But you didn't come this far to become what they were. You came this far to become what God called you to be. Stay pure, stay humble, stay hidden in spirit, even when exposed in the natural. Because your protection isn't in hiding, it's in holiness. There are others watching this right now who feel like you did months or even years ago. Unseen, misunderstood, discarded. Speak to them with your rise. Let your breakthrough become their confirmation. Remind them through your testimony that delay is not denial, that silence is not rejection, and that the prophecy will always find its rightful vessel. Your very presence gives them hope. Your voice awakens their memory. You're not just rising for you. You're rising as a blueprint for those who still think it's too late. Let your life say, "It's never too late," when heaven has the final word. You are stepping into rooms your name never entered, but your spirit was already known there. Opportunities are opening that make no earthly sense, but they align perfectly with what God whispered in the dark. This is the reward of private obedience, public breakthrough. And now, as your life begins to reflect the prophecy that once seemed like a fantasy, never forget that it was forged in fire. This isn't luck. This isn't coincidence. This is the unfolding of divine design. You are living proof that destiny delayed is still destiny delivered. There's something sacred about how quietly God works. While they screamed their names into platforms and altars, God whispered your name into eternity. While they lobbied for power, God prepared your character. While they called on demons, you were being covered by angels. And now, the contrast is undeniable. One by one, the false lights are flickering out, and the ones who watched in silence will finally admit the light we needed was the one we ignored. But you won't need to say, "I told you so." Your glow will say it for you. And here's the final twist. Their weapons made you wiser. Their curses made you cleaner. Their silence made you stronger. They thought they were breaking you, but they were building the vessel that could carry the true prophecy without distortion. You are now the embodiment of what they tried to destroy, and not even they can deny the grace resting on your life. That's why the enemy is silent now. That's why the warfare has shifted. Because once the prophecy takes form, there is no going back. You've been through enough to know now. The crown doesn't come from applause. It comes from survival, from resilience, from staying close to God when it would have been easier to run. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes you the real one. The prophecy couldn't rest on anyone else because no one else was willing to be crushed for it. That crushing made you ready. That breaking made you whole. You are not just someone with potential anymore. You are someone who embodied the process. And because of that, your life will continue to unfold in divine precision, beyond anything you could plan. So let the whispers come. Let the watchers stare. Let the ones who once doubted you squirm in silence. You don't need to defend your name anymore. Heaven already did. You don't need to announce your calling. It's written on your energy now. And the most powerful thing you can do is continue. Keep rising, keep walking, keep glowing. Because with every step you take in obedience, you're not just reclaiming your own destiny, you're healing generations behind you. And you're blazing a trail for the ones who come next. That's what real legacy looks like. And if this message pierced through the fog and hit your spirit like a memory you forgot you carried, then say it out loud in the comments right now. The prophecy was always mine. Write it, declare it, stamp it in the atmosphere. Let this video mark the moment you stop questioning and start owning who you are. Now, my special request is that you help grow Being Extraordinary and click the like button below. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss another divine broadcast destined for your journey. I want to thank each and every soul who has supported this mission through Buy Me a Coffee. Your generosity is not only keeping this message alive, but also helping it expand. If you also feel the call to support this movement, the link is right there in the pinned comment. Now, before you go, watch the next video that is on your screen right now, or binge watch the playlist. Feed your spirit until there is no room for doubt. The prophecy is alive. The prophecy is you. See you later, and may God bless you.